Okay, so today we're going to talk about everything coordinate plane. On the next slide, I'm going to quickly show you some different things that we'll be talking about in this video. And then I will also chop it up into a smaller section so you can go back and watch that particular section. In that case, let's go ahead, let's get started. Here is our learning checklist. So we will learn parts of the coordinate plane, how to plot and locate points on the coordinate plane, rational numbers on a coordinate plane, the different quadrants, and what is an independent and dependent value. So let's go ahead and get started. Parts of a coordinate plane. Let's go ahead and label what the horizontal axis is. The horizontal axis is the x-axis. The vertical would be my y-axis. Where those 2 points intersect, that is my origin, always represented with the ordered pair 0, 0. Next, I would label where my positive and negative would lie. Remember, it's just a number line. So when I go to the right of my number line, that would be a positive. When I go to the left of my number line, that would be a negative. And the same thing would apply when I'm talking about my y-axis. When I go up, that would be my positive, and when I go down, that would be my negative. Next, it is important to know each quadrant. The best way to remember this is by remembering the shape of the G, and I will quickly show you what that means. Starting with my quadrant 1 and wrap it around, it will form the shape of a G. So in this case, this will be quadrant 1, this will be my quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Let's go ahead, let's go to the next part. Locating and plotting ordered pairs. Determine the ordered pair for the points below. So in this case, we need to go and look at my coordinate plane and determine where each point or the coordinates of each of these points. Let's go ahead and do so. Okay, so let's look at point A. So I locate A on my coordinate plane. And remember, we always have to do X, Y in that order. So that means I need to go on my x-axis first and then my y. So to get to A, I would simply 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So I go to the right, a positive 4, and then I go down a negative 4. Those would be the coordinates or the ordered pair for A. Let's speed it up and let's go ahead and try the others. Now let's practice it reverse, where we have to now go in and plot the points. And again, we would do this process the exact same way. So the first number will represent my x value or my x coordinate, and the second value will represent my y. And that would be the axis that I would move on. So let's go ahead, let's look at A. So when I look at A, I see that both numbers are positive. So if I look at 5, I know that I'm going to move to the right 5 on my x-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. My y is also positive. So again, this is why it's also important to label. I know that if I go up on my y-axis, that is a positive. So I'm going to go up 3. 1, 2, 3. And that will be my point A. Let's try one more slow-mo and then we'll go ahead and speed up and finish the rest. Let's look at B. Again, start at your origin, which is in 0, 0. And then it's telling me I'm not going to move any on my x-axis. So I'm going to stay put. But I am going to move up 2 positive on my y. So here goes on my origin. I did not move, and I'm going to go up 2. 1, 2. So this would be point B. Let's speed up the process and complete the others. Now let's look at rationals on a number line. Before we do, let's quickly review what we talked about earlier with just regular fractions and decimals on a number line. And then we'll go into it on a coordinate grid. So first things first, we need to know when we are on a number line, we need to count how many intervals are between each space. So let's look at this practice problem. Okay, so let's look at the number line below. So first, I would just simply count my lines. I would not count 0 because, again, it already has a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 would be my denominator. To determine my numerator, I just simply count the line. So this would be 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, and 7/8. And then, of course, 8 over 8 turns into 1. Now, let's look at some with some whole numbers, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the coordinate grid. Okay, so now let's try this process when I have whole numbers. Again, the process will work the same way. But since I have whole numbers this time, I'm only going to count between each whole number. I will not continue all the way down to the end of the line. So let's go ahead, let's look at the first one. And then let's determine the location of each point. So again, count 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know that my total or my denominator would be 4. So now I would go back and simply make my fractions for each one. So just looking at my number line, I see that A is located at 3/4. Now, since I already know the pattern, that pattern would continue. So let's go ahead and let's look at that and just add a whole number to it. So 1 1/4, 1 2/4, which is also 1 1/2, 1 3/4, and then 2. So that means B will be located at 2 1/4. And that means C would be located at 3 1/2. Now, let's apply what we just learned to a coordinate grid. Determine the points of ordered pair for the points below. So in this case, again, we're doing the same thing that we did earlier, but now we have rational numbers. Now remember, rational numbers can either be fraction or decimal, but we'll keep it fraction for this example. So again, looking at if we know that this is 0, skip, and then that this is 1, I have two spaces between. So in this case, this would be half, and then half plus half, that gives me 1 whole. So in this case, we know that each interval is half. So now let's determine what the ordered pair would be. Let's look at A. A is going over half, 2.5, positive, and then it did not move up or down. So my y coordinate would be 0. Let's continue. Let's look at B. I went over 1, 1, 2.5. So in this case, it'll be a positive 1 and a positive 2.5. Let's look at C. Negative 1, negative 1 and 75 hundredths, because it's in between my half and my 2. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's 1 point, or a negative 1.75, and then I'm going up 1.5. Point D, we continue that process. A half, and it's going over positive, and then I'm going down, which is negative 1, 1.5. So half, and then a negative 1.5. Let's look at our last point. I'm going over a negative 3, and I'm going down to 2.5, both being negative. Let's move on. The last thing we're going to talk about is quadrants and being able to identify the independent and dependent values. Okay, before we look at the practice to the side, let's quickly refresh on what each quadrant is and where it's located. So we know quadrant 1 is positive, positive. Quadrant 2 goes to the left and up, so it'll be negative and positive. Quadrant 3, we go to the left and down, again, making it negative, negative. And then for quadrant 4, we go right, which is positive, and then we go down, which is negative. So in that case, it'll be a positive negative. So regardless of whether the number is a positive or a negative, a fraction or a decimal, follow these methods. We know it has to be positive, positive, negative, negative, positive, negative, negative, and positive, negative for each of these quadrants. So let's look at the first one. So we have a negative, negative. So let's look and see which quadrant has a negative, negative. Quadrant 3 has negative, negative. So therefore, A would be in quadrant 3. Let's go ahead. Let's look at B. Positive, negative. Which quadrant has a positive, negative? Quadrant 4. Let's quickly look at the others. Negative, positive, and positive, negative, which is quadrant 4. Let's continue and talk about independent and dependent values. One thing that we need to know, whenever we're talking about independent, that's going to be my x value. So if we know that x is my independent, then that means we know that y is my dependent, which could also be called my x coordinate or my y coordinate. Let's quickly refresh the order. We know that x goes first and y comes second. What is the independent value for point B? So first we have to know the ordered pair for point B. So we start in my origin. We don't go left or right, but we do go up. So we already know that my x would be 0 and my y would be 2. Independent means x. So in this case, my x value would be 0. So x is equal to 0, or my independent value is equal to 0. Let's look at the next question. What is the dependent value of point D? Dependent means y, which in this case would be my y coordinate. Let's get the order pair for point D. 5, -4. In this case, my y value would be a -4. Let's continue. So remember that y coordinate and x coordinate is the same thing as my independent dependent. So in this case, we're just looking for my dependent value. Let's find the ordered pair for C. I go over a -4. I don't go up any. So in this case, it hits the y-axis on 0. Y is equal to 0. What is the x coordinate of point E? Again, we're just stating where does E hit the x-axis? At a -2. So in this case, my independent value or my x coordinate will equal to a -2. Good job. I will leave you with some practice to try independently. Here you will plot your point, be able to locate points, and for a little bit of extra enrichment, try being able to locate which quadrant each point is located in. Here you go.